let's talk about the recovery process, because our main focus today is not on the abuser, it's not how terrible the narcissist is or how terrible the difficult person is, although there really are actually. But I want to put more focus on the recovery process, on the victim or the survivor. In my practice, I want to put it into 3 stages of who the clients are going through. Although it's not a linear process, trust me, it's never a linear process. It's very complicated, and sometimes it can be very, very messy, back and forth, and that's totally fine. That's our natural way of growing and changing. So it's totally fine. If you're experiencing this different stages, you're going through the back and forth stage, or you're riding like a roller coaster, it's totally fine. The reason why I want to put it, because I just want you to kind of visualize, because I'm really a visual person, to visualize the stages that clients go through to help you understand what kind of techniques you can use to help them grow, or what kind of support you can give them, resources you can provide to them. So there's basically 3 stages. The first stage is trauma-informed, or what I call victimhood. One of my clients told me the other day, she said, I don't want to be, seen as a victim. I know it's okay, but I feel like it's my fault, to make that mistake. Or I'm so naive, to fall into that trap. I feel like I don't have that power or that knowledge about what's going on in my life. I feel like I'm so vulnerable. It's common. I think people have a bias. I don't know if in your society or if in your culture that's very common, but here, at least in my practice in China, I've seen a pattern that people would always have lots of bias and stereotypes about what a victim looks like. By victim, I'm talking about, someone is vulnerable. Sometimes someone is weak. Someone is, is naive or innocent. Innocence can be a very negative word sometimes in some circumstances. So victim has this kind of natural way of, this person is weak, I can't really take care of myself. I'll tell my client that victimhood is normal. It's only the first stage you enter into a recovery process. By claiming yourself as a victim, you are pointing your finger to the abuser. It's not me who made the mistake. It was you who chose me to abuse me, who lied to me, who gaslighted me. That's very powerful, because when we go back to that image in our previous slide, the cycle of abuse will trap. It's like a trap. When you walk down the street, having no idea about what narcissistic abuse is, no education in our curriculum at all, you will fall into that trap because it's so charming. It's so tempting, right? It's so tempting. So it's very easy for people who have no knowledge of narcissistic abuse to fall into that trap. So it's actually a very empowering term. But victim or victimhood is the very first preliminary stage people go through in the recovery process. And the second one would be surviving. As a survivor, you know that what you have experienced. You know that it's not your fault to experience this form of abuse. You have tools and strategies to deal with your emotions, to take care of yourself, and to say no to injustice and to unfair treatments. Grief work is part of the surviving process, because grief work means that I will talk about that in a few minutes. Grief work means that you're dealing with emotions involved in this kind of relationship. It can be related to hope, fear, pity, sadness, even relief. it can be like a tsunami, as one of my clients described what she is experiencing during this surviving stage. The emotions can be like a tsunami, and people can't really understand what's going on. Clinicians who are not very familiar with this idea would be like, oh, you're having depressive moods, or even you have depression, or you have anxiety disorder, you have panic attack. So these are some of the misconceptions people have around the surviving or grieving process. And the third stage, after you survived from your emotions, your feelings, and the cognitive dissonance, you will come to the third stage, which is self-reconstruction or thriving. Now you maybe have a decent boundary with the abuser. That doesn't mean you have to leave the relationship. I guess I have to leave is another misconception people have around narcissistic abuse, because I have seen so many women, especially low-income women, who are involved in narcissistic abuse. They don't have resources, unfortunately. Our society doesn't provide them with enough resources and strategies to leave this kind of relationship. And it's heartbreaking for them to leave their kids and to not see the kids, because the husband can be sometimes very powerful and abusive. And the husband will take a revenge on the wife. So it's really difficult for them to leave the relationship. But still, even if you stay in the relationship, you can still thrive. You can still make your own little choices. You can still remind yourself that you're a whole person. You can still own your reality. That's possible. I will introduce you guys with some of the techniques or tools I find useful to help your clients. And these are some of the stages for you to conceptualize what the clients are going through from this process. And it's not linear, just remind you. Okay, let's come to the theme of today. Finally, I need to check my time. Already passed 60 minutes. Sorry, guys. I will hurry up a little bit. How coaching can help. Today, I think people who attend this webinar are coaches or who are interested in coaching or mental health in general. So coaching, actually, just for people who don't really understand the term coaching, let me give you an example or a definition. I copy and paste this from ICF, International Coaching Federation. Copy and paste. Partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. Basically, it doesn't say anything to me, but I will provide my interpretation, understanding of what coaching is. And coaching is very different from therapy on three main ideas. The first one is present. Coaching focuses on the present issues. I know therapy sometimes deals with past experiences, childhood experiences and trauma, but coaching is mostly on the present, what you are going through, and how can I help you at the moment, and we can make a plan, action plan, to really deal or face the challenging situation we're in right now. And collaboration, I love this part. I know therapy is getting more and more focused on, creating a power balance relationship nowadays. But in some of the, previous practices, the therapist is the authority. And I also have seen people who kind of have this fear of authority, because we're living in a society, especially for people from mainland China. We have this kind of tradition of honoring authority, honoring an authoritative figure. For example, like your father, your teacher, your professor, like an elder. We'll obey them, even though we don't disagree with them, but still we have to show respect. it's a good tradition in sometimes, but it can be bad because whatever they say, you have to respect. You have to internalize. The internalization process can be tricky because even though, cognitively, you understand what they're saying is like bullshit, right? But still, you will internalize their words in a very subtle way. So, collaboration for me is very important. As a coach, I don't have the right to say, oh, you're feeling sad, right? Oh, you're feeling angry. And I've seen lots of clients who went through therapy. The therapist didn't understand narcissistic abuse well, or they didn't have the chance to understand what narcissistic abuse is. They would say that, oh, you're angry, even though they're sad. They feel like they're not enough. The therapist would be like, oh, you feel angry. Your anger has to be discovered, You have to feel your anger. You have to express your anger in a very rigid way. I know it's not I don't really know what kind of therapy this client went through, but when I hear the therapy would pinch on that anger onto my client and saying that you have to fear, you have to have anger, you have to feel the anger, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I can imagine myself in the client position. I will feel very, very confusing because imagine me, I'm gaslighted by my partner. And now you as a therapist, you tell me that I have to feel angry. I have to express my anger. I would get traumatized once more, right? So it's very confusing. So that's why I really agree with what coaching says. Me as a coach, I'm in an equal position as my client. My client sometimes has to teach me what they're experiencing, what they're feeling. And as a coach, I can use direct communication to let my client know, like if I am in that relationship, how I feel or what I'm sensing at this time, or I'm looking at maybe bodily, reaction or some gestures, some facial languages. I can reflect, but I can never push that onto my client. I don't have the right to say, oh, you're angry, or you should express your anger. So that's why I feel like coaching has a very positive effect on this therapeutic process or this recovery process and action. That's very important. One of the criticism I have for psychology, and that's why I learned coaching, because psychology, as at least what I learned from psychology as an undergraduate, and also what I learned from my clinical training is that, it's always about the words. Sometimes action is in part of some disciplinary. I want to highlight that on that. But most of the times, especially talk therapy focuses on, what happened in the past, about your childhood, about what experience you have. But the thing is, when you go to the outside world, when you really face that abuser, sometimes it's really, really hard to use that knowledge into practice. So in my coaching sessions, I have more freedom to choose what I want. And sometimes I can be very creative. I would invite my client to do a role play, just like in a theater, and I can pretend to be the narcissistic partner. And I can use those, script provided by the client to role play the process. And how do we use the tools like boundary setting, you have to say no, or how to express your feelings, how to practice gray rock, how to practice no contact in that session. Because I think practice makes perfect. So by role play, my clients find it very helpful, very helpful to go through that process. They will get equipped to go to the outside world, to get into that reality, to deal with an abuser in action. So let's talk specifically about what you can do as a coach in the three different stages, including trauma-informed, grief work, and self-reconstruction. So trauma-informed in coaching, it's very, very tricky. As I said in my very first PowerPoint, I told you guys that you can never diagnose someone. We're not qualified. I'm not sure if in your culture or in your society what the system looks like, but now in China, you cannot diagnose someone if you don't have that clinical training, or you don't have that credentiality or whatever. So trauma informed means that we don't have to name that person as you have narcissistic personality disorder, because we don't see that person. The narcissistic or the difficult person, because they have low empathy, or they don't have that reflection on themselves, so it's really hard for them to go to see a therapist. They cannot be they cannot be diagnosed, right? So, but as someone who, as a victim, or who was abused by that difficult person, what we can do as professionals or coaches, we can describe what we hear from their perspective, from their story. I know coaches, the main focus is on the client themselves, but still we can provide some insights by using direct communication to let them know what we hear this person's partner, boss, co-worker, parent, what they're doing. Crave model is one of the best useful tool I always practice with my clients. I learned this from Dr. Ramani. She's a very amazing person on YouTube. Feel free to check her YouTube videos. I learned a lot from her. I also attended her trainings last year. She offered a series of trainings on YouTube. So I really love that. So if you can get a chance to attend her seminars, I highly recommend you guys to take a look on that. So what can we describe, or what are some of the languages or terms we can use to help the client reflect on what they are experiencing? It's craved. By craved, I mean conflict, rigidity, antagonism, vindictiveness, victim, vulnerability, or entitlement, dysregulation. And these are the terms. We're not talking about narcissism or narcissistic tendencies or narcissistic personality disorders. And people will point to your face. How dare you diagnose people, right? But we can still use some words to help clients reflect on their relationship, on their partner. For example, we can use direct communication. Direct communication means the ability to communicate effectively during coaching sessions and to use language that has the greatest positive impact on the client. It is part of the ethics or coaching outline on ICF. If you want to know more information, you can definitely visit the website, and there are lots of useful resources on there. But still, by looking at the definition, you have no clue of what we're talking about, right? That's fine. I'm going to give you an example. The format I'm using more often is this. I'm hearing, I'm seeing, or I'm sensing something. And how does that land with you? For example, when a client comes in and she complains about her husband, my husband is very, very emotional, can get angry all the time on small little things, and he doesn't care about me. He doesn't listen to me. Or he is very, his mind is he's very narrow-minded. I can't really talk to him. And I feel like he always thinks himself is the best in the world, is the best in the workplace, is the best among his friends. And he always asks me to do something against my will, He always prioritizes his needs over mine. If you hear some of the patterns, you can give some reflection to this client. You can say that I'm hearing, some rigidity, or entitlement or dysregulation in this relationship. How does that land with you? If you can notice, I'm not giving any prescription or diagnosis here, right? I'm only reflecting what I hear. And it is the client, his or her right to decide whether this is her experience. But it is helpful because by having this framework or by having this model, it's very useful for us to understand, kind of have a structure of what's going on. If the person says, I don't think my husband is that awful, it's okay, let's move on. But if she says, yes, I think so, I think it quite lands with me, it's well said, I feel like something wrong going on here. And then you can provide some psychoeducation, or even after your session. I know during the session, as at least what I learned from my coaching training, that you can't really guide the session. It's the client responsibility, or it's the client, his or her right to decide what's going on in here, right? So you can let the client decide what to do next. If the client wants to know more information, you can provide some resources to him or her, or to them. Or if she's not interested, or he's not interested, they're not interested, then that's okay, we can move on. It's the client's decision to decide where the coaching session goes, right? So I think it's very helpful. I find it very helpful to have this framework in mind, to remind what the client is going through. And even for us, like coaches or clinicians or professionals, if we have this kind of model, it will be very confident, or even we have kind of like a structure to understand what's going on, even though the structure can be adjusted, right? It doesn't have to be, narcissistic, but still it gives you a framework of understanding what's going on. Okay, the second stage is grief work. I think people who are, familiar with mental health in this area would feel, would hear this word a lot. Grief work, grief. By grief, I mean there are 5 stages of grief. Grief is the feelings you have after you lost someone significant. Psychologists Ross and Kessler, they propose 5 stages of grief. It means denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. These are the emotions people are generally going through during the loss of a significant one. But sometimes it doesn't have to be a linear process again. So you can feel denial in the denial stage, and then you feel angry, how dare you leave me, and maybe then you can go back to the denial stage. Oh, maybe, we can go back together. Maybe you keep contacting this person. And this cycle can be repetitive. So it doesn't have to be linear. But I think grief after narcissistic abuse is more complicated. Oops. It's more complicated than kind of the normal, I hate the word, but you know what I mean, the normal breakup or the loss stage. A grief can happen within a narcissistic relationship. You feel that the person is changing, is leaving you, even though he is beside you or she is beside you. They are beside you. It doesn't matter the physical distance between you and the other person. It's more about emotional feeling. You feel like this person is distant, emotionally distant. So the loss sometimes can be she's gone, or he's gone, they're gone. But also you have to deal with another layer of grief, which is that the loss of a love story you wish you had, but you never got. Remember the honeymoon stage where people make great promises? He will make you feel like you're the one, or she will make you feel like you're the most special person in the world. But at the end of the day, you feel that it's a lie. It's a total lie. And you loved a person who never occurred in this world. It's so hard to accept the truth. Not only you're dealing with someone is leaving you, the person is leaving you, the physical person is leaving you, but also the one who embedded in your mental state, never occurred, who wish you had. You have to let it go. And that's the hardest part. So what you can do as a coach when your client is going through this process, I know therapy would be helpful, but as coaches, we can also provide some crucial help to our clients. The main idea is to validate their feelings and reality in order to help them break the cognitive dissonance. The reason why we have this imagined love, or we have this magical thinking that maybe if we can try hard enough so that the person can turn back to me, he will love me again, or she will become fond of me again, because of cognitive dissonance, because we justify their behavior, their thoughts, and turn that into something, it's our fault. If we try hard enough, we can make up this difficulty, or we can conquer this challenge. And this kind of thinking will trap people into difficult relationships, and it's very hard for them to leave. And when they experience cognitive dissonance, when they experience grief work, some of the common feelings or emotions they experience are relief. Oh, I finally left this person. I feel so lucky. I feel the burden I have, is removed. Finally, I can live my life. But soon after you feel relieved, there's a vacuum, or this, like my client said, a tsunami of emotions are coming toward you. And it's very, very hard to deal with those emotions. For example, like fear. Oh, what if I made a mistake? What if the person were not difficult? It was my mistake, maybe, the therapist, like Molly, if Molly, because she's specialized in this area, like narcissistic abuse. So she sees everyone is like narcissistic, so that, I talk to her. She has that, bias. So I made a mistake. And fear can also be like, oh, what if I can't really find another one? What if people after my partner, they are all terrible? And it's okay just to have one relationship. I'm not alone. Being in a difficult relationship is better than, living alone, Especially, I know, I'm not sure if in your culture or society is like this, because in nowadays China, we're progressing into a more gender equal society. We still have a long way to go, and it's still very patriarchal. So women who are in their 30s, after they got divorced, or after they break up with their partner, they will have this fear of, oh, what societies will look at me. I'm like leftovers, I have this pressure of getting into a relationship to be complete, to be enough, to be as a human. So this kind of fear is haunting them all the time, and it's preventing them living an abusive relationship. And the societal ideal is all about, having a family, having a kid, living a happy life with your partner. So it's not very friendly, to single people. Hope is very usual. Hope is very common. Hope is like, oh, I can change them. I can go back to the initial stage. We can get back together. We can have happy life together in hopes of changing the other person. And I guess in lots of religions, I've worked with people with like a background of Christianity, and also Islamic beliefs, and also Buddhism. So they have this idea of forgiveness is very powerful. You have to forgive your enemies. You have to practice forgiveness, or any form of spiritual beliefs, spiritual practices. There's a high emphasis on forgiveness. So if you a forgiver, I'm happy for you, but in some circumstances, if you forgive the person, if you still have the hope of the person can change someday, you will give knife to them to hurt you in a more severe case. And pity. I feel sad for their childhood, especially when you're dealing with a vulnerable narcissist. They will use their terrible love story, how their ex-partners betrayed them, how their ex-partners, neglected them, how their parents, how their caregivers abused them, beat them, how they were having a terrible, hard childhood. They have a terrible immigrant stories. You can go on and on those tragedies or sad stories they have. And as people with, an average level of empathy, we will feel sad for them. And if you're an empath, you will have this tendency to help because it's part of your core belief. It's normal. You want to help people. Helping people makes you happy, and that's part of the meaning of your life. But when you encounter people with narcissistic tendencies, or when you encounter people who are difficult to deal with, or antagonistic people, it's really hard for them to change. But you have this kind of pity for them. How to deal with that kind of pity? And how do you deal with your core belief? You will feel challenged by this kind of experience, right? Because it challenges your core belief, your core part of yourself. So it's really hard. And guilt. The common guilt I heard was that, oh, I have done something wrong. The person slapped me on my face, and I said, ouch, I made a mistake. It's so heartbreaking to hear people say that, oh, it's my responsibility, or especially when growing up, when your needs and when your words are not seen, not heard. So it's a natural tendency for you to make apologies, to say, oh, I'm so sorry, it's my fault, I should have done better. This will trap you into a really narcissistic relationship because the other person is always entitled to tell you what I do is right and what you do is wrong. So you have this kind of pity, oh, what I've done is wrong, even though these are the small little things. And even though sometimes your reaction sometimes can be really abusive reaction, is caused not by you, it's caused by the other person. It's called reactive abuse because it is because the other person who has done something wrong to you and you are in a very activated state, so you react abusively to another person. It's common. But if you don't know the context, if you just see what the person, especially the victim or the survivor is doing, you will think that, oh, this person is abusive, this person is violent. And then the person will internalize, the victim will internalize that message and will keep blaming herself or himself or themselves. Will be like, oh, it's my fault, I'm violent as well. I'm no better than the abuser. So why don't I just stay in the relationship? I don't deserve anything better. It's sad, right? Comfort. the common example I hear from my clients is that, staying in a relationship is better than leaving alone, is better than dealing with all the societal expectations, family duties, or facing the financial difficulties. It's sad. On the one hand, the society doesn't provide enough resources for minorities or for people who experience domestic violence to make their choice. On the other hand, they're vulnerable inside. They need help, and they need more support, and they need a process to make the decision in the end. It's never easy. Whether you leave this relationship or you stay, it's never easy. So we can always use direct communication, as in the previous slide, to help clients in this kind of situation during grief work, during grief process. The most common thing I use, because as a clinician or as a practitioner, I always hear people coming back and forth due to cognitive dissonance. People will be like, "Oh, she cheated me twice or many times, and she always said she was the victim. She said, she was having a bad day. I didn't take care of her, and when I suggested her to go to the therapy, she didn't listen to me. She said, therapists are like, crazy people. Therapy doesn't help. So I can deal with my shit. I'm gonna be responsible for myself. So I don't need any help. It's your responsibility to change your mind, to take off my emotions, to take care of my responsibilities." And then I'm validating. I'm hearing lots of, "Oh, it must be hard. I'm sensing a little bit sadness," or "I'm sensing there's a, in power balance here," or "I'm sensing one party taking way more responsibilities for the other party's emotion needs or other needs." And then the person will be like, "Yes, yeah, I think I'm taking too much responsibility. She's invading my boundaries. She's breaking my boundaries." But then the person will be like, "But she's having this kind of hard time at her job. Her boss is abusive, or her parents are, falling sick, and COVID is crazy. She must have a hard time, so that she doesn't listen to me, or she's very needy at this point, or she had a really hard time with her parents as a kid. She was neglected, and she was abused by her parents, by her friend. I need to take care of her. I need to take more burden from her." And you can see this very conflicting point of view. Sometimes the person is very clear on what's going on in this relationship, but then due to cognitive dissonance, justification, wanting to stay in this relationship, wanting to make sense of what's going on, the person would switch to, "Oh, she's okay, she's having a hard time. And sometimes we have a good time together, we had great sex, or we had wonderful dinners together, and she gave me wonderful gifts. We took lots of beautiful couple pictures together." How do you put them together? It's confusing, right? As a coach, you hear different versions of the stories. What I always do as a coach is to use direct communication to let the client have a more realistic view on what's going on in this relationship. By saying that, I'm not against happiness, I'm not against, a couple should have normal life. You can't really have happy time together, or you can't really have you can't really show empathy toward your partners. I'm not talking about that. What I want to say is that to help your clients have a more realistic view on what's going on in this relationship, not a distorted view. So I will use direct communication to say that I'm hearing two versions of your partner. One version is she doesn't take care of herself. She is asking you to, she's asking to take too much burden, and she is invading the boundary. And there's another version of her being very friendly, very charming, very helpful, and having a difficult childhood. How would you reconcile these two versions? Let your client think and reconcile, and to deal with the complexity and to face that cognitive dissonance. If your client has this idea of cognitive dissonance, he or she, they will definitely notice what's going on. I'm justifying, my partner's behavior. Oh, I fall into that dissonance once again. So they will have that awareness. Just by reinforcing that awareness, by reinforcing that realistic view of the other person, especially the abuser, they will gradually break the cognitive dissonance. But if we, as a coach, say that, oh, you're in the cognitive dissonance, see, it doesn't help, because you have to give your client the chance to practice, to do the mental practice, and to let him, her, or them to realize what's going on the unconscious level. So this is like a mental exercise, a mental practice that needs to be reinforced, even though we know cognitively, intellectually, but still, by practice, we need to really reinforce it within ourselves. And also inner child work is another practice or exercise I always use during my coaching sessions. It's an invitation. By using that, inner child means the wounded self, the wounded kid within you. It can be something that happened in your childhood when your parents are neglectful and you have to try hard, behave well, make good grades, or get a good job in order to please your parents. And this kind of tendency will be repeated in your later adulthood relationships. When you interact with your partner, you have this tendency of please your partner, prioritize your partner's needs. And also you have this kind of urgency or eager to really talk to the person as a way she or he wants, they want. So this is tendency, maybe by inner child work, by meditation. I think inner childhood meditation is very helpful for the client to understand what was going on in the past and the repetitive patterns they have. So you can check on inner child work or inner child meditation for your clients to understand, have a better understanding of the patterns they behave in your relationships. And when you're triggered, when the client is triggered, the patterns can be seen as fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And this is the awareness comes from the term complex PTSD. So, hi Mia, thank you for coming in. And if you can mute yourself, thank you so much. That's an old friend from our community.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. Nice to hear from you. So these are the technologies we can use. And self-construction is the third part. I'm running out of time. The third, I'm gonna go through quickly. So I want to really leave you guys some time so we can discuss and we can talk about it and share your experience with me. Self-reconstruction is after you survived, after you got tools and techniques that you can deal with everyday challenges and difficulties. So then we'll enter the third stage of self-reconstruction. The key question clients always face is, should I stay or should I go? It's always there. Even in the first few stages, the client would always ask you, oh, should I stay or should I go? I don't know. I don't want to leave, even though I know I should go, but I can't leave my kids. I can't live with my partner. She's so vulnerable, and he's having a difficult time, and I'm so weak. I can't imagine myself living without him, living without her. It's so sad to imagine that, right? Yeah, it's common. It's very common. It's a hard choice. And we as coaches or clinicians, we have no right to say, because everyone, ideally, but I have to say ideally, it would be nice if you can leave this type of relationship. But when it comes to real life, it has to do with cultural, issues and social expectations, resources, and privileges. And there's so many different things you have to take into consideration. So it's never an easy answer. And sometimes staying in the relationship is a process to leave. So as clinicians, it's our responsibility to help or even to assist clients to make the decision as they want, not as we want. And sometimes clinicians can be gaslighting. When clinician says, oh, you're feeling angry, or you have to leave the relationship, he's dangerous. Oh, this is it. I need to make an exception, because if the person is going through severe abuse or domestic violence, physical violence, I think it's a sign to leave. But still, we need to find the resources and to seek professional support. Other than that, I mean, especially in my practice, I've rarely seen lots of severe abusive cases. Or most of my cases are, mental abuse. Although mental abuse is also a sign to leave, but it's really hard to recognize and it's hard to notice, right? So my philosophy, is toward this question is it's a personal choice, not a textbook answer to follow. There's no right or wrong answer. It's an answer dependent on the client, her circumstances, or his choice, or their reality. So it's not our responsibility to tell. It's never our responsibility to tell. If you stay in a relationship, I think Dr. Ramani's work I would highly recommend you guys to take a look on her book. Actually, one of her book is called "Should I Stay or Should I Go?" It elaborates wonderfully. So take a look on that. I think she did a good job elaborating on the choices between stay or go. So take a look if you're interested. But here, I just want to introduce briefly about this concept as what if you stay in a relationship? What difficulties or what challenges you're gonna deal with? Realistic expectation. If you stay in this relationship, you have to have a realistic expectation on the person. The person will not change dramatically, magically. If you can't leave, if this person is your parent, it's your sister, your brother, your sibling. If you can't leave right now, you're in COVID, your boss is narcissistic, it's difficult to deal with, and it's hard to find a job right now, and you can't leave, that's okay. That's totally fine. I know, understand it's hard, it's not your fault. But better to equip yourself with some tools. For example, realistic expectation. This person will not change dramatically, and they will get angry sometimes, and they will abuse you, verbally abuse you, physically abuse you even. Be prepared for that. Radical acceptance. To accept difficult people, they don't have the willingness to change, even though you can learn a lot, communication skills, and you can improve yourself a lot, you can work out, you keep fit, but still you can't really let the person come back again because it's not your fault. It's their willingness, their inability to change, their inability to be empathetic. Setting boundaries. Setting boundaries means you have to keep a distance, both physically and emotionally, away from this person. And better for you to create a safe space to take care of your emotions. And when the person is invading your boundary or the person is stepping on your boundary, then it's your responsibility to say no or to give no response, or to, especially emotional response. People sometimes get confused with, getting angry means, I am claiming my authority. But being angry or getting emotional sometimes can be used as a weapon for the narcissist to turn against you. They will be like, "Oh, you're going crazy, You're emotional. You're having emotional issues. You should go to see a therapist. You should tell your therapist that you are the one who is crazy." Even being angry doesn't give a shit, right? I know sometimes being angry is a sign of, claiming your energy. But if you're venting out your anger toward a narcissist or a narcissistic person or people with narcissistic tendencies, they will use your vulnerability, they will use your emotion to against you. So be careful on that. I would say gray rock is the better way to deal with that. No explanation. Don't personalize everything. It's not your fault. He will attack you. He will attack anyone. So it's not your fault. And documentation. Keep record of everything you can do, like text messages, record your talks, video talks, audio talks, your phone calls, and collect as much evidence as you can. Otherwise, when the person turns against you, especially if you're going through a divorce or if you're going through a lawsuit, you need to have some evidence and consult like a lawyer or attorney for further legal information. But unfortunately, in the law field, I think most lawyers and attorneys, they don't have any knowledge on narcissistic abuse. But it's okay. You can use our craved model to communicate with your lawyer to describe what kind of person, what kind of a partner he or she or they are. So it's better for you to use kind of common language to describe their behaviors, not to label them, because labeling sometimes can be very troublesome. And if you leave this relationship, it can be hard. It's really hard. Safety comes first. I've seen rarely I've seen clients who receive death threats from their narcissistic partners after they left the relationship. Unfortunately, they are safe now. They are only threats at a threat level, but please prepare. If you get prepared, if you want to leave the relationship, pack your stuff and hide those, unsafe objects like knives, or other things that are not safe in your household. Prepare to go, and don't let the narcissist know. Don't let your toxic partner or parent know that you're living. They will stop you at any cost. So better go just by yourself. Find a friend if you need some support. Keep it under secret. So this is very important. Sometimes people will get emotional, or sometimes people will get it's easy, right? Because as people with healthy level of narcissism, we will want to have a happy ending. We will want to end in a happy manner. But for people who are toxic or who are narcissistic, it's really hard for them to understand what leaving means. It will trigger their narcissistic injury. They will feel hurt again. They will feel like you are using their vulnerability against them. You're betraying them. They will be triggered so much that they will do some extreme behaviors against you. So be careful with this kind of choice. If you are dealing with a malignant narcissistic person, it's even more dangerous. So please make sure safety comes first. And when you leave this relationship, no contact is a must. it's a process, I have to say. In practice, people would say that, oh, I want to check their social media from on a regular basis. It's hard for me to not to check their social media. It's okay. I know ideally no contact has to be practiced right after you leave that relationship. But if you can't, that's okay. Monitor your frequency. Especially in today's world, it's really hard to get rid of the person from online, right? But monitor your frequency. If you want to, for example, if you check his social media or her social media twice a day and 30 minutes for 30 minutes, and then maybe you can cut it off for once a day, maybe 10 minutes. It's a gradual process. Changes doesn't come, in a really dramatic way. It always comes in a very subtle, consistent, and very positive manner. So if you can lower your dose little by little, that's going to be more sustainable. And practice solitude. Don't rush into another relationship, even though the society has so much pressure on you. But practice to leave it alone. I always suggest my clients to live alone, enjoy your life, heal yourself for a year, and don't date, don't have casual sex. I know it's hard, but try to be with yourself. Because when you're in a narcissistic relationship, you became like a caregiver, like a nanny for everything. You had to take care of everything. And after you left, it's okay to feel, there's a vacuum inside of you. You feel meaningless in life. You have to find meaning in your life. That's totally fine. Practice solitude. And boundary setting. Say no. Practice to say no. If you can't really say no to significant ones, like people who are close to you, especially when your parents, that's okay. Try to practice with people you're not familiar with, in a nice way, not in a really terrible way, in a nice way. Try to say no to, for example, like a coworker, or try to say no to a salesperson. Try to say no to like some old friend, even you don't really see very often. And like, for example, if they're inviting you to a dinner, even though you're available, but you can also take that as a practice to say, oh, no, I'm so sorry, I can't go, I have something important to do. And you don't need to give an explanation. You don't have to think in their shoes. Just say, oh, thank you for inviting me. Sorry, I can't really go. Because if we give explanation, it means that, no, it's not enough. I have to give another story of why I can't go. Try to cut it short. Try to practice to say no in a clear manner. It takes practice. I know it's hard, but give it a try. And self-enhancement, that means we try to give support, give validation, give unconditional love to ourselves. Sometimes we have the hope that what if my parents can turn back to me someday? Especially when you're in adulthood life, when you're in a relationship where you can easily get, angry and frustrated, especially toward your parents or people who are intimate with you. It's natural because you have having this kind of hope that your inner wounds, your childhood wounds, would be seen by this person. But try to give that support, unconditional love to your inner child by yourself. If you dependent on, validation, I can't say that it's narcissistic, it's normal. We all like validation. We all want people's admiration. But if the admiration can really come into you, even though people say, oh, you're so great, but you will be like, oh, I'm not great, I just, by luck, I can do this presentation like today. But take it personally, give that support to you. I'm great. Yeah, I did a good job. And validate yourself on every small step you take. And it's a process. And also career planning. I know if you're familiar with coaching, life coach is an umbrella term. People have different niches on each atom. So if you have other specialty in career planning, health, planning and everything, nutrition, wellness. You can combine them into this self-reconstruction process. You can help the client build a holistic life. And this is also a very useful part of coaching we can use to help clients who went through narcissistic abuse. And imagine this exercise. This is the best, most useful exercise I always use, practice with my clients. Imagine your future self, because our brain doesn't have this knowledge of what is the past, what is the present, and what's the future. So we can use that trick to trick our mind. If we imagine ourselves in the future, we can train our unconsciousness to think in a future way. If we have achieved the life we want, what I can do in the present. So it's a mental process. It's like an exercise you do to train yourself to think in a future way, not to trap into the past, but think positively in the future. And one of the powerful quotes I learned from my client, she just left a very abusive relationship, and I asked her, what made you change so much? What made you leave that relationship? Because she was trapped into that relationship back and forth for, I don't know, 10 times at least. And I asked her, what made you make the final decision to leave that relationship? And she said, it's because my future self. I imagine myself living a peaceful life, not in drama anymore. I can do my laundry peacefully. I can talk with my friends whenever I want. I can do little things, like I can eat spicy food on my own. I don't have to take care of my partner's emotions. And that's such a relief. And I can focus on my job, my career. I can work hard enough to get what I want. That's a blessing. Although I took it for granted before I entered the relationship. But now I know how precious it is to be at peace with myself. And that's the end of my presentation today. And in the end, there are some of the tools I suggest you guys. You can take a look on some of the books and exercise, and also trauma-informed mental health service. That these are the tools I recommend my clients to take a look, and very useful. And last, I want to say love is humble, love is deep, love is consistent and caring. It's about the other person, not an extension of myself. And this is a lesson, a lifelong lesson, me personally, I have to learn. I have to practice with my partner. So I know how hard it is, but it's worth it. I feel like narcissism is the human rights issue nowadays. So I know our voice, our energy, or even our effort seems to be so little against those C amount of narcissistic tendencies going on in today's society. But still, we can do tiny little things to make a change. And I think that's worth it. And by having you guys here today, until now, after all those technical issues, you still want to stay with me and listening to what I'm saying, I feel appreciated and I feel blessed to have you guys today. And let's turn to the discussion. And you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you have WeChat, we can always connect each other on WeChat. What are your thoughts? I really want to hear from you guys.
Molly, I want to say thank you so much for laying it all out in such it's such a complex concept what we're talking about, as far as the person who's coming to you as a client and the person that they're dealing with in their relationship. Excuse me. And I appreciate you laying it out so well. Sorry, I've got something in my throat. And I imagine that this might be actually an expression of my feeling as you were talking about things, because of my own situation with narcissistic abuse and wanting to be able to help other people go through the process that you described. And Yeah. So anyway, I just want to say thank you very much. And wow, when you mentioned Dr. Ramani, I was really happy because she's just such a force of nature around this topic. Um, and I want to I'll put in the chat a couple of links to a book that I found that's been really helpful. An Australian book called See What You Made Me Do about abusive relationships, and also the definition of love from an American psychologist named Scott Peck. He says love is extending yourself for the growth of another, and the other can be yourself. So extending yourself for the growth of yourself, even,
Mm.
which can be hard. It's not an easy sort of a thing. So I will put these in the links, and I'll stop talking right there and just say thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much, Catherine. Thank you for being here. And thank you for encouragement, because as I said, I was a little bit nervous in the morning because of Zoom issues we had. And thank you, Louisa, Catherine, and everyone who has been in this webinar for the whole session and the whole time. And I'm really blessed to get a chance to work with clients who went through narcissistic abuse. And I'm a victim and survivor as well. My parents, especially my father, he's narcissistic. I can't diagnose him, but he truly has narcissistic traits. And also, I was in narcissistic relationships, not only once, but twice, even more. So I know what victims and survivors feel as a victim or survivor myself, and also as a clinician. Um, so I really appreciate your ideas and your care for survivors and victims, Catherine, and you're doing a great job. And thank you for the links you share. And it's great. I'm definitely gonna take a look at them. And feel free to get connected. And if you have anything, share or case studies, maybe we can organize a small group as coaches or as professionals. We can talk about that. And even we as clinicians, we have to get support from each other. So it's so nice to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone? Oh, thank you, Mama. Thank you, Elaine. Hi, Louisa.
Hello, Molly. Thank you so much for. I think I really learned a lot from this seminar, and I really can feel your passion for helping people with narcissistic abuse. It's I think it's a topic that is pretty close to my heart because I had similar experiences as well. So and so when you actually shared this, do the sharing, right? It's like, like, oh, this looks very familiar. This cycles, like, the cycles and phases. It's like, oh, hey, this is exactly, it's like crystallizing the terms, like this is like the experiences, the phases, then the emotions that has gone into it. Yeah. So and they're pretty similar. Like my dad is that kind of like he exhibit narcissistic traits. So I think so the patterns and cycle of like different relationships, has brought me to where I am. And I think it kind of like really inspires me as I'm like finding my niche, because I'm like when I mentioned to you earlier on during this session, like I like to help people with like those intergenerational trauma. So it's kind of like making it more clear who, yeah, like kind of making it more clear who I can help, especially when Mm, I think myself is it's like a testimony when, after going through that, and also being at the phase of like uh having this year of solitude. So yeah, so I'm like kind of identify like, oh hey, this is the year of solitude for myself. Yeah. Yeah, and then and also doing the career planning. So it's kind of like if uh like share I hope to share with people that this is actually possible, especially when there are times in our lives that we feel really, really stuck in a rut, and it seems so hard to get out. Yeah. So thank you for sharing all this with
Oh,
us.
thank you so much, Louisa. I appreciate your um, telling your story about with us, and I really resonate with your story. And you're a true living testimony. And I think every one of us who is interested in this topic, who has gone through narcissistic abuse, who is just struggling with those emotions and self-doubt, it's a lifelong process. But you have the courage to stand up and to advocate for this information. I think is wonderful and wonderful. And I hope, just for information, I do a podcast. So if you guys, Catherine, Louisa, and everyone here today, and if you're interested in sharing your story to the Chinese audiences, or even in English, that's totally fine. If you want to share your story with other people and think we are all advocates, not only clinicians, but also advocates, I highly recommend you to join me on my podcast.
I think I would just like to say one other thing, which is one of the things that Dr. Ramani talks about is, I've seen a couple of her videos specifically about whether narcissists can change. And that's sort of something I'm hearing from other people in narcissistic relationships. That's a big hook, how do we get this person, how can we help them? How can we help them change and grow and love and all that sort of thing? And her point is that narcissists will change if it's in their interest. But because they have that original wound and don't have a capacity necessarily for empathy or to access their empathy, what they can do is become maybe a little bit more aware of themselves and their behavior, and in a way act as if, because they know it'll be good for them in their relationships with the people that they want to stay connected to. So I think what I'm trying to say is it is a hook for those of us who want to help and change the narcissist. And I kind of like that there's a little bit of balance to the humanity of somebody who has a narcissistic injury, that there is, I guess probably all of us have a, like one of our skills or tools for being a human being is to recognize what the requirements are in a social situation. And possibly, I'm just sort of riffing here, so I guess I'm asking if this sounds right to you. That because most of us have that ability, that narcissists in particular, it's an option for them if they're aware of how to, that their behavior is not getting them what they want in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for bringing that up, Catherine. It's a very important issue. I wish I could have that in my PowerPoint. It's wonderful for you to bring that up because it has to do with hope, right? In hope that this person can change, and sometimes they can show change after the cycle goes back to the honeymoon stage, from the discards or the devalue stage. And in that stage, in honeymoon stage, the narcissist will show some, that old charm, romance. They will buy you gifts. The most common trick they play, from what I've observed, is they will buy lots of stuff. They will spend lots of money, or for vulnerable narcissists, they will be like, "Oh, let's go to the trip you wished you had. You mentioned before, or let's celebrate our anniversary." Although the narcissist even forget what the date is. Actually, I've seen that case before. So, oh, let's do that. Let's do this. Let's do the things you mentioned before, but we never had the chance to do. And that's the trick, because all their makeups, of the remedies they do, they are all based on a very superficial level. Very superficial level, like consumerism, like having parties, or even sometimes it can be a little bit deep, like recognizing your emotions, but it's not consistent. So that's a tricky part for clients. It can be very hard for them to believe this is just a short period of time. It's just a short change, but deep down, the manner or the persistent manner can really be changed, or even it can be changed. Still, it cannot be to the point where people can get or maintain a healthy relationship. So that's a question I always ask my client. I always ask them, what's your definition of a good relationship? What's your needs in a relationship? I hear they're doing this and that. to excuse themselves, or not excuse. Actually, that's a really it has some tendency, but they're trying to this to fix your relationship. And what's your thoughts on that? Are these things how do their fixes reconcile with what you need? And let them think. It's very easy to get trapped into, oh, are they narcissists, or are they changing, or what are some of the signs they're changing? But bring back the focus to the client. Ask them, how do you feel about what the partner does or the changes? And are they really need those changes, or they just want to see the hope, or they maintain the hope? So I think it's better for us as clinicians to shift the focus from the partner to the client.
Mhm.
That's my thought on that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
But thank you so much for tuning in today. And I wish we could have this webinars maybe more often. And I think I will put some updates, post some updates online. I created a new Facebook account, so find the Yuwei Chu, who doesn't have any followers. That would be me. So it's easy. Okay, so thank you guys, and wish you have a happy day and stay healthy. Bye.
Thanks, Molly. You too. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Catherine. Thank you,
Have a
Louisa.
good
And
day.
thank you, everyone else.